everyone, it's Miriam with a Y. Alcohol ink art is becoming more and more popular, and one particular popular technique is the airbrushed flower. I want to show you one of my techniques for making them. And for this technique, I am not going to use ink out of bottles. We're going to do this with just markers. Now, alcohol ink markers can be pricey, some running up to $8 a marker. But let's use an affordable marker set that is rich in color and variety. This is a relatively new set by ARTEZA. It came out just a couple of months ago. This is a set of 60 markers, but if you want even more colors, they also have a set of 120 colors. When you get them, they come in this nicely designed case with buckle type closures up front and a zippered compartment in the back if you want to be able to carry little extras with you. They have swatch cards attached, but I recommend making your own swatch cards because the colors here aren't really as accurate as they could be. So make your own. The case also comes with an adjustable strap if you want to be able to carry it around. Except for these closures here, everything else opens and closes via Velcro. Your markers will each be individually held on these panels, which you can also detach if you prefer. There's a strip of Velcro here, which matches up here. There's a spot for a dozen extra markers here. So if you end up getting more blenders or replacement markers, or maybe other markers you want to be able to carry around, there's room for them here. Each marker has a bullet nib at one end, a chisel nib at the other. The caps are clearly labeled with the color name and number for easy reference. And the triangular shape of the markers makes them less likely to roll off the table when you start pulling out lots of them. And I really think you will, because look at this batch of lovelies. I mean, don't you just want to pull them all out and play with them? I certainly did. The case is a nice way to store the markers and travel with them. To be honest, for me, I'm likely to store them loose so that I can grab them quickly and often. In the video's description box, you'll find US and European links for both the markers in general, as well as the overall ARTEZA websites. You'll also find a 10% off total purchase coupon code, which is good until August 10th, 2019. Just select the appropriate link in the description box for your location. Oh, and shipping for any purchase is free in the US and the UK. All right, let's make some pretty multicolor flowers with these, shall we? You can do this technique on most alcohol ink friendly surfaces. I'm going to be working on Grafix Opaque White Craft Plastic. If you aren't familiar yet with this new plastic, make sure to watch the video that I'll link at the top for you now and in the description box below to see why this paper is better for alcohol ink than Yupo. Because it doesn't stain like Yupo, it's much more heat tolerant, and it's significantly less expensive. I've cut down a 12 by 12 inch piece 2 6-inch pieces, since this is more of a demonstration video. I'll also be using my airbrush and a cake spinner, just for convenience. The cake spinner is not a necessity for this, but if you happen to have one, it does make life easier. That or a Lazy Susan, something that can spin your work surface quickly for you. That's all. I've pulled out a few markers in colors I'd like to use for flowers. For this technique, it's best to choose brighter, richer colors because they're going to get thinned down quite a bit by the alcohol. So if you use a pastel, you won't see it. But I've chosen a little slightly lighter versions of each color that I pulled out just for a little bit of contrast. But for the most part, choose your darker colors. I'm going to walk you through what I'm about to do. I'm going to put a pencil mark down where I want to start my flower, where I want the center of my flower to be. And then I'm going to put 3 bands of color. Well, 2 bands with a bigger dot in the middle. And again, that's just going to be a tiny pencil mark. I made it a little darker here just to make it visible for you while I explain this. Then I'm going to drop a drop of alcohol. So let's assume that's the drop of alcohol. And this is the tip of my airbrush. I want my petal to go this way, let's assume. I am not going to put the tip of my airbrush or where the air is blowing out into the puddle. I'm not even going to come to the edge of the puddle. I'm going to come outside of the puddle, completely outside, and then blow forward. So that's the goal. And then I'll turn, put another drop, and do this. The reason for the pencil mark is this area will quickly clear of ink, and I would lose my center. But having that little dot lets me know where my center is at all times. The pencil mark won't blow away, but later we'll be able to get it off very easily. Okay, so let's do this. As I said, I'm starting out with a tiny pencil mark for myself, and around it I'm going to put 3 different colors. Now you don't need to be perfect about this. For my second band of color, I'm going to make dots and dashes. A plain ring of color would be fine too, like I showed you in the sketch a minute ago, but I'm showing you this trick because when I change up how I add a band of color, I often get more interesting petals. Not always, but often. Meaning as the colors disperse in the alcohol, as the petals are forming, sometimes they develop interesting lines or textures if I had put like a little bit of a pattern in the ring of color. The alcohol is going to pick up the colors as I push it forward with the air, so it'll pick up the colors differently if they're laid out differently. I hope that makes sense. On the second petal, I had too much alcohol at the end, so I tried to blow it further out, but it was too late, and I got little finger-like tips on the end. I don't like those. I'll be able to hide that boo-boo later. Now, every time I put a drop down to blow forward, I put it down on that little pencil dot so that I can maintain my center. If you're not 100% sure of where your center is, and you start putting your alcohol drops sort of in various places, like a 1/4 of an inch this way, 1/2 an inch that way, what ends up happening is that your center starts to kind of widen and get distorted, and you lose the overall round shape of your flower. So that little tiny dot is a big help. So I put that drop down on the dot, and then I aim my brush in my desired petal direction. I move the airbrush forward slowly and not very far because I don't want very long petals. If you want longer petals, move a little faster and further. I'm showing you this in real time so that you can see the speed at which I'm moving the airbrush and the distance that I move it. It's not far at all. Now, the number of petals you make is entirely up to you. I was thinking I'd be symmetrical, but then I changed my mind because, it's just, I don't know. For some reason, it just looked like it needed an extra petal over here, so I just did that. When I was satisfied with these petals, I planned out the next flower's location. I want it to be close enough to overlap the previous one just a bit so I could hide my wonky petal. I made this color layout just simple bands of color this time to show you that look too. Another thing I do differently is add more color midstream. I made that decision in order to have more pink and yellow in the upcoming petals. Okay, I could stop here, but let's make this flower fuller than the other one by giving this new one more petals. So I add a bit more color first and then grow some petals. When I'm done, if I have unused bits of color left in the middle of the flower, I don't have to worry about that because the next step will take care of all that. For this step, I've moved you closer to the action because I'd like you to see how close I bring the airbrush to the paper. I select a starting color for the center of my flower. Once I add the alcohol here, I'm going to blow straight down. So the airbrush is going to be at a right angle to the paper and perfectly in the middle of the dot of alcohol, or as perfect as I can get it. Any slight tilt of the airbrush will prevent this middle from forming evenly, as will any deviation from the center of the dot of alcohol. So all these positions that I'm showing you now would be unsuccessful. This position is your goal for this. Okay, I'm adding my alcohol, and then I place the airbrush in position around 1/4 of an inch or 6 millimeters at the absolute most away from the paper. And then I give it a full prolonged blast of air from the airbrush. So I leave it on until the alcohol is completely dry. The closer I can get to the paper without actually touching it is better. So if you can get like 1/8 of an inch away or 3 millimeters, that's even better. I add more color to blend with the yellow and repeat. Now for this stage, I want smaller drops of alcohol. So I'm using a microbrush to add them. The airbrush step is going to be the same as before. Close to the paper, as perfectly straight as I can get it, and a full blast of air. The blast will be way shorter here because it's less alcohol. When I'm happy with all of this sort of daisy-like, roughly starbursty thing, I finish up the white center that ends up forming with a little dotting with the markers for texture and a little extra color. And then I move on to the other flower and repeat all the steps. If you're new to the channel, take a second to subscribe and hit the bell afterwards so that you'll be notified when I post a new alcohol ink, resin, or mixed media project. When choosing your center colors, make sure to pick colors that play well together and that don't end up creating a muddy color when they get blended, because a lot of blending happens in this particular stage too. If you're not sure if colors might make a little bit of a muddy color, try blending them on a scrap piece of the graphics paper or whatever surface you're working on. With this all done, let's add some greenery. A couple of stems and leaves to sort of really finish off the flowers. I want something super simple so as not to take away from the flowers. The one thing I do want to do though is camouflage a spot where I accidentally dropped an extra drop of alcohol earlier as I was making the petals. After looking at this from a couple of angles, I decide on this one, and with a couple of green alcohol markers from the ARTEZA marker set, I draw in my greenery. I'm hoping you like the variation in color you're able to give your petals with this technique, and that you'll share it with your ink-loving friends. When you try this, play around with different patterns for the marker colors that you put down, like dots, dashes, skinny bands of color, wide bands of color. Try different colors, different angles of your airbrush for the petals, not the center. The center's always got to be 90 degrees, but when you're blowing your petals out, try different angles. Try different distances. In experimenting, you'll find out which combinations give you the results that you like best. Because how one person makes their flowers may be different than the way you'd like to make yours. And make sure to come show off your work in my Facebook group. I would love to see what you make and where you take this. Remember that links for everything are in the description box below, as is a coupon code for 10% off any ARTEZA purchase, not just the markers, but anything you buy from the site, from either of their websites, the US site or the European site. Leave a thumbs up if you'd like to see more product demos, more alcohol ink work, and let me know in the comments too what you'd like to see and what you thought of this. Thanks to those of you who kindly contribute to the channel and to everyone who uses my Amazon links to get to the site. You are helping keep these videos coming. Thank you for watching. Let your creative nature shine. See you soon. Bye now.